Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another uLaw webinar. And in today's topic, we're going to be covering everything practice management. We're going to be talking about the core components of the Law Society's requirements and under the guidelines of the practice management boundaries, the types of areas of practice that both from a documentation as well as from an obligation standpoint as a legal professional, the different pieces of information that you need to capture, document, and deliver as okay. For those who are joining us by using the computer audio, I kindly request you to use the phone numbers that have been provided in our email. If you can kindly use the phone numbers and dial in, the audio quality would be way better compared to computers, and we apologize for that inconvenience. So we kindly request you to dial in using your phone numbers. I am using a brand new Bluetooth or a headset so that it's easier. So kindly do suggest if the audio quality is better using the chat window. I do again request you to mute your phone lines and use the chat window to provide us any feedback or ask us any questions during at any time of the session. Last but not the least, as mentioned, today's webinar has been accredited for CPD credits, of professionalism credits across 3 provinces. So we've got Law Society of Ontario, Law Society of British Columbia, and New Brunswick. Okay, so please do log into your individual portals, and the title is Everything Practice Management. So that's what you're searching for in your portal to report your professionalism credits. Okay. It's the 1.5 hours of credits in Ontario, 1 hour in British Columbia, and 1 hour in Brunswick. Fantastic. So let's get going with no further delay. Someone's basically said that the phone quality is not that great. I am going to try and switch phones if that makes it easier. Hopefully the quality of the phone is better now. It would be great if you let me know if the quality is better. That way I'll change the headsets if I have to. Okay? This is fantastic. All right, so as part of everything practice management, basically what we're looking to cover in today's webinar is to kind of give you a walkthrough of the professional obligations that you as a legal professional in Canada are kind of expected to take care of, understand to begin with, and make it as maybe a part of your discipline or your process of running your business as a legal business. These are some of the obligations that the law societies across Canada require you, to adhere to, if you will. And what we've done is we've taken the bookkeeping guidelines, we've looked at the audit guidelines, the compliance guidelines, and we've broken it down to 7 of the core buckets of obligations that you can group different types of documentation, different types of data sets, data that they need you to capture, data that is required for you to report, and we've categorized them under these 7 sections: client intake, file management, financial management, business management, professional management as a legal professional, time, personal management, being a segue or an extension where the Law Society does talk about how you can be better at managing time, as well as leave space and time for personal management, because that really adds to the, I would say, more than a hygiene, it's just a motivation for you to come back to work the next week or the next day, to have that personal space so that you're more focused when you come back, you're more refreshed. You're not as stressed as sometimes this impression may lend itself to. Okay, so we're going to talk about each of these different obligations that you have. We're going to dive deeper into the individual components of it. We'll also talk from a practice management standpoint, the amount of documentation information that is required to be captured, some of the core documents that are required to be presented, both from a perspective as well as from a perspective of just personal discipline as a legal business, so that you're audit ready at any given time. Okay? Client intake, and we've kind of grouped service and communication all part of that. So right from your client intake form to signing your engagement or retainer letter, and the correspondences that happen prior to you actually creating a matter, even all that's kind of grouped into the first section. And then we'll kind of go one after the other, and definitely give ourselves time to catch up with personal management. Okay? Again, quick refresh for those who just joined us. Today's session is accredited for professionalism CPD credits. So again, please mute your phone lines and use the chat window to ask any questions that you may have. As part of our first bucket or category of professional obligation as a legal professional, we've taken client intake, service, and communication, and we've divided that category into 5 subcategories or components, if you will, that you want to have or be aware of. Okay? So as part of that client intake, service, and communication, the law societies talk about the need to capture and record a detailed recording of all the consultations and calls, in-person meetings that you may have with a prospective client who may then end up becoming a real client. Sometimes it's called a ghost client, someone who just flirts with the idea. Sometimes called as a ghost client. Regardless, you want to have a process, a discipline, especially if you're just getting started in this business. You want to have a process for recording each and every call and consultation. Okay, so that's something that you want to keep in mind. Let's say you've done a simple client intake for a prospective client. Before you can go ahead and actually start to just create files and just get work started, there are certain things, there are certain guidelines, certain types of rules and regulations and boundaries that are set. For one, it's in your best interest to a conflict check or conflict screening, if you will, for any confidential information that you may have captured in a prior engagement or a prior transaction. So let's say you're dealing with a client, Jeff Greenberg. You probably want to understand if you've come across Jeff in a previous engagement. Have you ever spoken to someone like Jeff? Have you created matter for Jeff before? So those are the types of things that you probably want to understand. And with the advent of technology, obviously you can do that using tools that give you that kind of information. It's great if you've just gotten started, then you pretty much have a good handle for all your clients. But if you're 5 years, even 2 to 3 years down the line in your business, you probably want to use tools and products that can help you, or may not serve you best. Yeah. But at the least, you definitely want to keep in mind that when you intake a client, one of the first things that you want to keep in mind is to do a conflict screening so that you're confident that there are no conflicts in representing this individual, or even if there is a conflict, you're fully aware of what that is. Okay? So let's say you've done the conflict screening, you've done the client intake, person's information, first name, last name, middle name, nickname even sometimes, and what's called as also known as name, address. Law Society would definitely like you to capture a communication address or a mailing address so you can correspond with them. And again, today's advent, you can also add emails and phone numbers to, add more information to the overall client data. And once you've done that, you do a conflict screening, you assess the risks. Let's say there are no conflicts in representing this individual, you kind of move on to the next stage, which is really creating a file. And before even creating the file, we talk about determining what we call as collateral or fees for an engagement. This is where Law Society wants you to understand that as a legal professional, as part of the service communication or communication of your service to your end client, come up with a, I would say, area of practice that you want to focus on. So certain legal professionals want to just stick to one area of practice, such as criminal or family. There are other legal professionals that may have a variety of, I would say, areas of practice, right from small claims to corporate litigation. You may also do landlord and tenant. So if your legal business is going to serve various areas of practice, you may want to learn from friends. You may want to understand the marketplace of what's working and determine a collateral or the actual fee structure, if you will, the better terminology, whether it's a billable time, whether it's a flat rate fees that you want to offer your clients, or if it's a combination. Sometimes it could be a contingency fee structure. So each of this sometimes lends itself to a fee structure. So doing that ahead of time so that you're very clear in your retainer letter or engagement letter to your client is something that you want to keep in mind. Okay? So let's assume you very clearly, I would say, orchestrated or presented that, let's say for this type of practice, for small claims, you're going to do a flat fee and you're going to add disbursements additional. So it's a $500 plus a $65 HST. It's a $100 disbursement. Let's say that's your fee structure for this small claims matter. And you define that in your retainer letter. The client agrees to that. Let's say he or she letter. Then you want to keep in mind some of the rules that govern how you handle trust money. Okay, there's always this importance around how you handle trust money, because in the recent times we've heard about a lot of trust money being misappropriated and how the law societies have come hard on these individuals. So it's pretty sensitive, but I think understanding the rules and boundaries of it are obviously going to help. No. So the quick question is the screen frozen? No, I'm kind of going through each and every step as we go on. As you can see, my screen is moving. We looked at how you can record consultations. We've done your conflict screening. We determined what your fees are for different areas of practice. And we're going to talk about, once you've accepted that retainer, ensuring that you deposit that retainer into the appropriate bank accounts. So again, when you start your business, or if you're just, even if you're a seasoned campaigner, depending on your situation, you may have your own trust account, and then you may have one or two general accounts. You want to make sure that anytime you receive money, especially if it's a retainer, you deposit that retainer into your trust account. You don't want to deposit it into your general account. Anytime money accepted in advance of you doing work as a retainer, that money goes into your trust account. Okay? So all we're saying is, as a professional obligation, the Law Society wants you to, again, have a discipline and a plan of whether you plan on having a trust account or not. There are some legal professionals who are strictly general only. They don't want to deal with trust. They have a belief that once they've done the work, it's a leap of faith. They would certainly get paid for after the work is done. Then they're just dealing with general accounts. There's no retainers, no trust money involved, which is perfect if that's your style. But if you do deal with retainers and trust money, then there's a little bit more of responsibility that you have of ensuring compliance and ensuring that you're doing the right things. Okay. So let's say you've finally done accepting that retainer letter, you've signed it, your client's really happy, they move along, you've deposited the money into the trust letter. Now the last step of a non-engagement is if, the worst case scenario, you start an idea of engaging your client for some reason down the line, whether you've accepted a retainer or even before that, if for some reason both your client or yourself determine that this is not going to work out and you want to non-engage, you certainly want to have, again, a template or a process to define, outline the rules of the non-engagement. So you clearly want to say that I, the legal professional, non-engage you, the client, for this and such reason, and you're no more obligated to continue representing your client for this matter. It's very important that you do that, because if you're not signing non-engagement letters, and if you've actually accepted that client information up front, without a non-engagement letter, it's just going to get down to misunderstandings and the client expecting you to represent them, etc., etc. So keep it very straightforward, very prudent, and if you are planning to non-engage your client, clearly sign a non-engagement letter. Okay. All right. So let's move along, so that way you don't think my screen is frozen. Top 5 things that you want to consider under client intake, service, and communication. A non-engagement letter is definitely a core component, I would say, as part of your communication. Is it mandatory? Yes, by all means. Yes, if you are non-engaging the client, it is required that you sign a non-engagement letter that's signed by you and your client. It's definitely an important document that you want to keep in mind. Okay. All right. So one of the more important aspects of communication and the service commitment that you provide all your clients across areas of practice is defining that first letter, whether that's an engagement letter, where there's no retainer, or if you call it a retainer letter, when there's trust money involved, whatever you want to call that letter. It's the initial initiation letter that you sign with your client, where you both parties agree upon a certain service quality that you would offer and certain responsibilities that the client has as part of that engagement. So you want to make sure that you define the roles and responsibilities of both parties involved in that letter, okay, or in that document, let's say. So we've tried to break down some of the core aspects of what that document or retainer letter or engagement letter should look like that you want to take home after this session. You certainly have client name. You certainly have a way of defining, and we'll get to this when we talk about file management, but at a very high level, when you're defining the retainer letter, you want to keep in mind defining the nature and scope of the matter. It always helps for your own personal management of your files, as well as the type of work you're doing. What's the scope of matter? Is there small claims? Is there a landlord and tenant? Even within small claims, is this a fence issue, or is this another type of slip and fall issue? Even with is it criminal DUI? Is it murder? Right. So you really want to define what the nature and scope of that is. I spoke about a little bit about client responsibilities. Now, you may want to think, all right, it's probably going to have to define my responsibility as a legal professional, but believe it or not, you also want to keep in mind that you safeguard your interest, your legal business's interest as well in that documentation, where you clearly tell your client that you expect clients to pay you, within a certain period of time. So let's say you agree upon a net 30 days payment, or day of sale of 15 days. You outline that on the document. Some legal firms, legal companies do offer sometimes charge clients interest. So it could be 18% annual interest or 1.5% per month for late payments. Again, you make that determination if you do that. And if you do plan to charge them that, it's best to also document it upfront. Clearly tell your client as part of that client intake and service communication, right? One of the obligations is you clearly talk to your client about their responsibilities that you expect out of them. Paying on time, maybe top-ups on retainers if that's what you like, ensuring that they give you all the pertinent information that's relevant to the file. Those are the types of things that you want to define and outline in that letter. Scheduling and course of representation, making sure that if you need the clients to be present at court as part of the area of practice, if it's required, that they make themselves available, how you communicate court dates with your clients. whether that's text, email, or written document that's mailed to them. And that leads itself to the next point, which is method and frequency of communication. Okay, whether you send them a mail by CAN post, whether you send them an email, you clearly outline the risks, rewards of different types of communication. The mail obviously takes time. Emails are faster, but then you definitely want to define risks and rewards of digital communication. Okay. Then we move along to the actual arrangement of the retainer. We spoke about this. So maybe initially you take a $500 retainer, follow that up, and if the file continues to be moving forward, then you probably want to top up every time either the retainer is completely taken care of, replenished, or there are law firms that says, I will take a $1,000 retainer up front, and once my initial retainer has dropped to $500, I would ask you for another $1,000 top-up. Okay, that's just an example. So those are types of the retainer arrangements that you probably want to keep in mind. Drafted, documented, shared with friends and colleagues, and for different areas of practice, have your own different types of retainer letters that can help. Okay. Retainer termination details. So if that's one of the aspects that the Law Society talks about, is for some reason either parties don't adhere to the rules of the game, probably definitely need to have literature around how you would terminate that retainer letter, right? So you don't want to leave any documentation that you've signed left hanging in the open. You want to always have a means for a logical closure to any documentation or I would say an engagement. Okay. Talk about the confidentiality, talk about how you would keep your customers' information confidential. And last but not the least, definitely outline in today's advent of technology where you're using cloud technologies, you could be using email, which believe it or not is cloud technology. Document the associated risks, more like a disclaimer, but then also talk to them in person about that. Okay? So the whole screen right here is to finally talk about that initial document that you sign with your client and some of the core aspects that retainer or engagement letter should look like. Okay? So right now we've covered our first category under professional obligations around client intake, service and communication. And the big takeaway is ensuring that you're capturing detailed information about calls and consultations, clearly outlining your service capability as a legal professional, service levels, and the rules of the engagement, right from retainer engagement rules and boundaries, the fee structure of that engagement, termination clauses as they apply, ensuring that you as a legal professional are safeguarding your own, I would say, the responsibilities that you have to make sure that you've done your conflict check, safeguarding yourself, and specifically talking about what a retainer letter or an engagement letter component should carry within that document. Okay, things to think about. Now let's say you've done a client intake, you've signed the retainer letter, obviously you would have created a file. So we want to move on to the next professional obligation that we want to talk about, which is file management. So the Law Society does talk about in greater detail about file management and has obviously certain best practices for you to take home and keep in mind, and we've just outlined what those are in a very easy to consume manner. Okay, so the Law Society, again, in no specific order of the screenshot, but talks about, having a checklist about incoming matters. So really having a file checklist of things that you want to do when you create a file. Okay, so one, when you create a file, you have the contact information of the client. You have complete client intake done. Okay, sometimes clients may just give you first name, last name, and, or maybe they didn't provide you with a driver's license at that time. So you probably want to maintain a little checklist of things that you need taken care of, or for your office to have taken care of for a complete file to begin with. Okay? Keep that checklist. Make sure that you're doing all the due diligence to get that checklist ticked off, all the components of that checklist done before you get started. Before you start a file or ensure that you've done the conflict screening, the Law Society actually has a conflict screening report that you can use to clearly indicate to the Law Society, if an audit does happen, about why you determined this client was not a conflict. Okay? It has a fairly intuitive, simple report or a PDF document that you can fill out that specifically talks about the conflict screening report. For example, if it is a conflict, if it's not a conflict, why did you determine that it's not a conflict, etc., etc. Okay. The third is one of my favorite topics. We come across this at uLaw on a very daily basis. We onboard clients, especially when they're moving from a manual process into a software process using our tools, which is having separate files for each and every matter. I'll go one step further to say that it's very important that you have separate file numbering system even for the same client. And I've said this many times, and it's very important that you have a very, I would say, cross-indexable file numbering system so that it's easy for you to track, search, and retrieve information about a specific matter or file, regardless of whether it's for different clients or whether it's for the same client. Okay? Have a separate file numbering system for each and every file/matter, even if it's for the same client. Very important. Fourth thing to keep in mind from a file management standpoint: a chronological and a secure way of organizing your files. Chronological, obviously, so that, either by date, by created date, or by first name, last name, initials, you're storing this information so it's easy for you to retrieve. Because a good majority of individuals, legal professionals, spend time in searching and retrieval of information in a law firm. So you want to keep file numberings as simple and as chronological as possible so that you can retrieve faster. You want to maintain it in a very secure manner. Talk to your service providers, whether it's a software product, whether it's you're using your own desktop, to ensure that both file management and the overall practice management components are secure, and the security that governs how you manage, especially electronic files. Personal recording of client interactions. So as part of that file management, you certainly want to, beyond just the dockets, you definitely want to keep a track of each and every transaction or interaction that you've happened. Make it a process to make it easier for you, I would say, to record those interactions, whether you use your phone to write it into your Evernote, or some tools, including uLawPractice, give you the capability to docket right from your phone. There are other tools in the market that allow you to do that as well. So regardless of what tools that you use, you want to understand and, again, make it a discipline, not just for yourself, but also for your firm. So if you're growing to be a large firm and you have assistants and co-workers that you collaborate with, you obviously want to educate them about ensuring that as and when things happen in a file, that they, I would say, docket it, or especially put it down on notes in the files as part of the file, right? Because sometimes you may write it down and want to go back and update your file system later on, but you forget. Sometimes you could have lost dockets and lost opportunities for revenue. And last but not the least, a way for you to have a proper organization through numbering and cross-indexing. What that really means is, let's say you've created a file for Mr. Jeff, and the next time, or even if you've created a file for Steffi and you have Jeff as an additional party in that Steffi's matter, the next time you create a client or a file for Jeff, it's cross-indexed so that when you search for Jeff, it pretty much gives you insight to all the other touch points that that name has had within your practice. So Jeff is a matter on its own, but should also reflect that he or she was an additional party in Steffi's matter as well. So it makes it easier for the different files to be cross-indexed based on the relationship that the parties have within the matter. And that level of deep dive, I would say, relationship can be easily established by using software tools. And having that level of deep dive relationship is also equally important for you to have, I would say, a very prudent conflict screening system. Okay? So again, second step of our professional obligation after client intake, we've looked at file management, some of the areas that you want to keep in mind when you create files as part of your legal office. Okay? So for those who've just joined us, we're looking at the professional obligations as part of Everything Practice Management CPD webinar today. We've just finished covering client intake, service and communication, and file management. And we're going to move on to financial management, another 30 minutes left in the CPD. It's interesting, I would say, area or category that we look to cover within the financial management. Okay, so now we've done the client intake. We've also created a file for this client. Now it really comes down to, we spoke about that fee structure. Now it's really implementing that fee structure and, again, having a discipline that allows you to docket and implement that fee structure as part of that file. Okay, so let's assume that for that particular matter, you've gone with a billable time as your way of scheduling or working with the fees for that particular time, in which case you probably want to determine what your per hour fees are. So let's assume as a legal professional you charge $200 an hour. You also want to outline if you anticipate utilizing the effort of your assistant, other coworkers or other colleagues in your firm, using any third-party consultants, and technically what their rate card looks like. Outline that obviously in your retainer letter, engagement letter, so your client knows what he's getting into right away, he or she's getting into right away. Apologize. And let's assume it's a $200 per hour for you. It's maybe another $100 per hour for your assistant. The proper fee scheduling of hourly rate and recording that billable time and ensuring that it's updated in your client information and also your accounting system. One, you want to docket that you spent that 1 hour on that particular matter. Two, you obviously want to ensure that that 1 hour of spent time can translate to $200 plus tax, $226. Again, if you don't have tax, then it's just $200. But if you do have tax, and again, if it's Ontario, it's 13%. Each province has its own tax structure. So in the province of Ontario, it would be $226 of revenue that's to be recognized, right? So as part of your financial management, once you've created a file, adhere to implementing the fee structure that you outlined with your client to begin with, and have a process or a discipline across your firm to record each and every transaction as and when they happen, especially when it involves billable time. Now, if it's a flat rate, so if you're going to spend 24 hours and you're still going to charge them just a $600 flat fee, it still gives you room for you to record work, because what software tools can give you today are analytics or insights about how much of time do you actually spend on a flat rate matter. So that then you can assess the situation, and if there are certain efficiencies that you can build, and if you can reduce the amount of time that you spend on a file from 24 hours to, let's say, 15 hours, then you save those 9 hours, making it a little bit more profitable than before. Okay, so you still want to capture the time spent. Whether you bill your client or not, it's a great habit, if you can, to capture the dockets and the time spent. Okay? Let's assume that you've done all the right things. You've docketed the time across your firm right as and when it happens. The next important financial component that to keep in mind is to also generate the invoices, which is the little document, and it's a weapon that you have to outline the effort that you've put in towards this file. You know, people are not going to just believe because you said you spent 2 hours. You've got a docket. So basically, document and record the effort. So whether you went to court, whether it was a document that you just drafted, or whether it was a client interview that you just had, docket it, track and record what you did during that, the amount of time you spent on it, and how much of time you plan to bill your client, right? Very important aspects. Once you've done that, so let's say that $200 worth of billable time needs to be translated as an invoice. So the invoice is the official document that you then send to your client to tell that, Mr. or Mrs. Client, here's an invoice for $226 for that 1 hour of work I did at $200 per hour. Depending on your situation, whether you have trust money or just general money, that may then lead itself to the next stage, which is whether you move money, the little trust money from trust to general after that invoice, or whether you wait for your client then to pay you for that invoice, if it's just a general engagement. Okay? So very important is the second step, which is the prompt transmission and delivery of invoices to clients. And the invoice can include not just dockets, it can include disbursements that you've had for the cycle. Depending on your area of practice, you may have types of invoicing schedules. You may do it as and when things happen. You may do it over a time period. So if some corporate lawyers tend to, invoice their clients on a bi-weekly or a monthly basis of all the work that they've done in a particular time period. So you can do that as well. Regardless, you want to keep in mind, do it as prompt as you've scheduled it to happen. Track, again, once you've generated an invoice, have a system in place, and legal counsel do this automatically. Have a system in place to also track clients that have payments overdue. So if for some reason you have 30 days as your payment, you generated an invoice 35 days back and the client has still not paid you, you probably want to keep a tab on all those, right? Be aware of that situation. Not just hope for the best to happen, but really have a system in place that allows you to then go back to your client, make that call, and ask them for that money that they owe you. That can only happen if you have a systematic way of generating invoices and tracking when that invoice was generated and compared with your payment terms. The fourth thing here is also equally important, recording of general accounts through general receipts and disbursement entries. So this then comes down to, we've done a few CPDs on disbursements. You can either have a disbursement where you pay it out of trust, because especially if you're dealing with actuals, it's a great vehicle to use to trust to pay off disbursement direct from trust. That way, you're not spending it out of your own pocket, generating an invoice, and then waiting for your client to pay for it. But in the scenario where it's a general disbursement, what that really means is you pay for that disbursement upfront using either your own general money from your bank or your personal money. You pay for it upfront. Let's say there's an application fee, there could be a fax, court fee, stand-in fees, whatever that fees may be, you pay for it upfront. Call it the disbursement, general disbursement, make it part of that invoice, as I mentioned, along with other dockets, and then for that payment to be made by your client, because only when payment is made are you able to recover that disbursement that you already paid for. Okay? So to do that, a very important prerequisite is to capture the disbursements as and when they happen in a system. You paid for an application fee, you cut a check for $100, and then you forgot all about it. You forgot to put that in the system and generate an invoice. And you've just moved along to the next. We've actually had situations like those. So when you reconcile your accounts, that you recognize that, oh my God, I haven't yet docketed or put that disbursement and generate invoice. Okay? But that $100 was taken off your bank. So your general account is now $100 lesser than what it shows in your bookkeeping software. So don't leave it to the last minute for you to react to the situation. Be proactive enough to do it and have a system in place to record disbursements, especially general disbursements, because that's your money that you already paid in advance. Okay? The last two things are record keeping, or I would say bookkeeping in terms of the documents that you're required to present. Maintaining original bank statements and books, especially canceled checks and any duplicate deposit slips that you may have. And the last but not the least, preparing the financial statements, okay, and both from a legal standpoint as well as a business owner standpoint. So from a legal standpoint, you look at your journals, your ledgers, you look at Form 9As, and then from an account, from a business standpoint, look at your fee book, your expense book. Okay, those are the types of documents, and we'll get a little bit more into it as we move along. Okay. We spoke about that briefly. So some of the core documents and information that you want to capture when you set up, especially trust accounts being involved, include ledgers, both for trust and general. It includes trust receipts journals. Again, I'm talking about trust, but it applies to general as well. Ledgers, journals, you've got disbursement journals as an entity. Then you've got your reconciliation report, which is a very important document, especially from a trust perspective. It truly gives you a complete picture of how you've managed your trust money, and the outstanding balance is very important for each client, and ensuring that the money in the bank reflects the money that you've accounted for in your bookkeeping software. And if there are differences, that you are fully aware of what those are and why it's led to that difference. Okay. Any outstanding balances, outstanding deposits, outstanding payments, those could be some of the reasons, could be bank error, could be another reason. But you're fully aware and you document the reason, if there is one, as to why the balance in your bank, in your real bank statement, as your bookkeeping statement are different. Okay, so I want to quickly draw your attention to another slide which we created. Okay. We spoke about both trust, but including fee books. A fee book obviously contains not just the docket, the billable time, but also includes disbursements. It includes HST that you've collected from your client. And an expense book is also equally important from a monthly reporting standpoint, because that captures expenses, including disbursements that you may have for the client. Okay? And most important, doing your monthly trust reconciliation. And it's also a great thing for you as a business owner to do your general reconciliation on a monthly basis. Because once you reconcile your general account, then it's as prudent as it can get with regards to the sanity of the numbers that you have. How much of real revenue did you make that month? How much of expenses did you really have that month? All of that is more or less written in stone, and it's the actual number once you reconcile that month. Okay, so general reconciliation is equally important for you to keep in mind. Okay, so we looked at client intake. You've got the client information. You've established service protocols, communication protocols, signed that retainer letter, created a file done all the right things to manage files, cross-indexable, having a file number system for each matter, separate, even if it's for the same client. Once you've done that, you've established the rules, you've signed that, got the file in, have the fee structure in place, and implement the fee structure by docketing in time, having the disbursements tracked on time, generating the invoices on time, and if there's trust monies to be moved from trust to general, then doing those on time as well. Okay? And last but not the least, from a financial management, especially for a legal professional, please keep in mind all of the law societies, documents, general ledgers, journals, receipts, the reconciliation statements that you need to generate on a monthly basis. Business management. Okay. So this law society talks to you about, now that you're a legal professional, so if you're running a solo practice or say a small law firm, so this truly applies to those entrepreneurs who run their own business. It could also apply to law firms if they're running obviously businesses as well. But if you're an employee working at a law firm, may not directly matter to you because someone in the firm at that level is already taking care of some of these things. But if you're a solo practitioner, you manage your own business, this may be very, very important for you to keep in mind. Okay, so as a business owner, part of the business management to keep in mind is efficient use of certain software. And again, it's not mandatory. Using software is never mandatory. But without software, we couldn't be doing what we're doing right now, which is me sitting where I am and showcasing a slide share with you. So there's obviously some benefits to software, and you want to capitalize the advantages software provides. Calculations, one-click generation of ledgers and journals, cloud-based software, whatever the software may be, do the due diligence, like a software that you see, try it out. There's many softwares that provide you trial periods as well. Try them out, make sure you're comfortable, speak to other colleagues and friends, but then truly invest in a software. If it's a legal accounting software, even better, because then you've got the best of both worlds. It allows you to manage your legal accounting numbers and the documents that go around that. Also, if it's a business, I would say QuickBooks or a legal accounting software with business accounting inbuilt, then you can also manage the CRA side of things, which is giving you true numbers of your income. Okay. So efficient use of a reputed legal software is definitely something that you want to keep in mind. If you invest, especially if it's a cloud-based software, as I said, do your due diligence interviews with the vendor and talk about the security of the files, the security of the software itself, that now it's on cloud. We've often been asked about these things, and we have, both a policy as well as a security statement that outlines how we secure files at each levels. So each company would probably have their own statements. So definitely understand, as a business owner, what software to use, what are the what are the pros and cons of using software, and ensure you're well aware of those cons as well, and take full advantage of the pros of the products you use. Mobile devices, by 2025, they reckon there aren't going to be any more laptops. It's going to be the death of tablets as well, and most of us are just going to end up with phones and just use our phones as the only electronic device in our household. And if that is the situation, then you want to take advantage of products that give you that capability on your mobile devices. No longer are you going to be running around carrying a laptop. You don't carry a desktop with you anymore, so that's the technology has kind of led itself there. Now it's the world of the dying laptops, and then it's going to be the land of dead tablets or iPads, if you will, and then it's finally just going to boil down to mobile devices. So whatever mobile device that you have right now, keep in mind when you invest in a product, look at how You can be offering flexible services both to your clients as well as for your own internal sanity, have a bit of flexibility so that you can then maybe run your business from a virtual office if you like. You're not then married to a physical space because your desktop resides there, right? And then talk about the different aspects of the security components of those mobile devices as well. And can lend itself to the fourth component, which is the remote access. Today, legal professionals, because of a lot of investment that's being made in legal tech, there's a lot of buzz around it. You're not dealing with paper anymore. Everyone's talking about a paperless office. Everyone's talking about a virtual office. There's no physical boundaries, so you could be sitting in St. Catharines and talking to or dealing with clients in different parts of Canada or outside of Canada. So having remote access, not just to software, but to all other components of your business. A great example is using, again, specifically not married to any product, but RingCentral or Vonage, any voice over IP phones that you use where your voice messages, your emails, all of that you can access from wherever you are. So anytime, anywhere, access to information is very critical for today's legal professional. So if you're starting a business or if you're looking to upgrade yourself to give you that flexibility of being a today's legal professional and a business owner, here are some of the things that you probably want to keep in mind. Okay. All right, so we move along to the next aspect of the obligation, which is the professional management. So you're a legal professional, and obviously you're part of this prestigious members of the legal society across the provinces. Each province has its own law societies. You may also have certain memberships, but as part of Law Society of Ontario or BC, New Brunswick, other provinces, there are certain core components that these law societies talk about with regards to your obligation to that profession. One is kudos to everyone who's joined us today for completing or in the path of completing your CPD hours. I believe in the province of Ontario, it's 3 hours of professionalism credits. I think that's the minimum or max. It's the requirement. So again, keeping a tab of your CPD requirements and ensuring that you completed, not leaving it to the end of December where you're scrambling and then you're paying for it, taking advantage of free CPDs like today and others that you can then search on the web, learning, not just getting CPDs for the sake of it, but learning through that exercise as well. Makes it very important for you to get back to that profession so that you're continuing to invest in yourself and also have a way of giving back to the profession. It's not so much an obligation, but I think it's more a recommendation that there are certain memberships of professional associations that are in your province or in your jurisdiction. Explore utilizing and being part of those memberships, only because then you're going to come across like-minded individuals, people with similar stories, similar success, similar failures that you can learn from. Okay, so take advantage. Sometimes memberships have great partnerships with other product companies, vendors, insurance companies, everything that's required for you as a legal professional to run your business. So memberships sometimes give back to the community for a certain fee, I would think. Sometimes it's, I think, free of cost. But again, being part of the membership, it's really not a mandatory obligation, but it's certainly a recommended aspect to you being a professional in this business. Obviously, you want to take care of reviewing new legislations and case laws, being top of your game, doing all the due diligence studying that's required, depending on the area of practice that you're in, ensuring that you're top of the game, you're well aware of all that things that are changing around you, because change is constant. And last but not least, most certainly reviewing and implementing professional conduct guidelines And as part of some of the recent, I would say, events that have happened, I'm sure you're aware, in our own province of Ontario and some other states we've heard, I think the conduct guidelines now also includes surveys, so that with regards to firm members that you have in your company for various aspects, right from handling clients to handling employees in a firm. There are many aspects to you as a legal business professional, as well as a business owner. So keep in mind of reviewing your professional conduct guidelines and adhering to it, and ensuring there's a process as well to adhere to those conduct guidelines. Very important. Sometimes audits can happen based on complaints, based on surveys, etc. So by having it a design as part of your company's requirement to be obligated and part of that professional conduct guidelines, we've seen law firms actually write down the rules of the law firm, right? They take the conduct guidelines seriously, and it's the top 5 or 10 things that have to be taken care of in that law firm, period. And if for some reason those conduct guidelines are not met, then it's an open HR room that you can walk into to talk about it. Okay, so we've kind of come to the end of the session almost. We talk about time management and personal management. We've pretty much covered from client intake to business management, professional management as well. So let me jump right into the time management and what Law Society is talking about those particular category. Being in this business, being a legal professional, especially in today's day time, requires you to be a multitasker. It requires you to multitask many different items. It requires you, especially if you're doing with different areas of practice, you need to be as dynamic as possible. You need to be litigating at court or doing your best at what you do at court, coming back, managing your own business, ensuring that you're keeping tab of all those court dates, all those client interviews. So there's a lot of stress on managing time. So some of the top 3, and again, these are things that you may already know. Sometimes it's just, I know it sounds like preaching to the choir, but this is just a way of emphasizing what you know so that you can continue to either improve upon the current process that you have or pick up a process that can help you manage time better, right? So a to-do list or task list or a calendar is a definite must if you don't have one today. Products that can help you, again, many of the email products today also come with their own calendar. Practice management softwares come with their own calendar. Mobile phones come with their own calendar. So you really want to understand whether you want to synchronize these 3 or have one single calendar that allows you to manage time across these silos. Sometimes keep in mind the personal time that you have and ensure that some of the court times or some of the client interviews don't interject. If you have a dentist appointment, you don't want to schedule a client interview during that time. Either you got to change your dentist appointment or change an interview, right? You don't want to be at 2 places at once. So time management is very important, and having the tools, and you are the best person to investigate, invest, and implement these tools. But definitely do invest in a task management or a calendar period. When it comes to managing files, which is, as I said, one of the most time spent in a law firm is searching for files. And the fundamental reasons why that is that sometimes files are not organized, they're not created to begin with in a very chronological manner. Hence, having those disciplines, you at least ensure that you're able to search for information faster. But beyond that, there are certain subtle things that you can do in a very subliminal way to maximize your time spent. One, your attention mostly on active files. Okay, because that's the task you have in hand. If you've had files that are closed, bring a logical closure to those files. Tag them as archived or closed or whatever you want to come up with as a name, so that you know you're not focusing your attention on those. Those are files that you're dealing with predominantly for conflict training purposes. Okay. Sometimes you may want to learn from these files. So if you've had a very successful landlord and tenant file, you know exactly the time you spent, the exact number of dockets and disbursements that you paid for. You can still go back and review those successful files if you like, but you want to focus your attention, and hence to do that, you want to categorize your files to begin with. Okay, so a little bit of a tidbit, if you will, about some time management. And the third most important thing that comes down to specific to legal professionals is being able to manage time that is non-billable. So pro bono hours, keeping a tab on those. Because we have a lot of legal firms that we deal with that sometimes don't, before they migrate over, have a hard time managing pro bono. They have a general sense of how much of free time is given, but not a very holistic view. So you want to have a method or mechanism that allows you to then track these non-billable hours and be fully aware of that. So if by design as a firm you're planning to give up those pro bono hours, then that is what it is. But if you did not know that you were giving away those pro bono hours, you probably need to build a system that allows you to track and measure those, because that's time spent as well, right? So time management is an ocean to talk about, but we wanted to focus on just three components that we felt were closer to the legal profession, and little things that you may want to change to bring a little bit more efficiency to manage time better. And lastly, also Society, believe it or not, in their bookkeeping guidelines and other documents talk about the need for personal management. As a legal professional, we spoke about how stressful this can be with regards to bringing food to the table, talking in court, managing your time, having to travel to different places, just the stress of being a legal professional, right? And as also as a business owner, if you're a sole practitioner, that can be a bit stressful. But really what the personal management slide talks about is, one, find an area of practice really that resonates with you. Yes, there are certain areas of practice that obviously reap more benefits in terms of financial success, but if it's not you and if it doesn't come naturally to you and you're really extending yourself just for the sake of money, maybe it's not a great idea for the long run. So you probably want to assess certain areas of practice that are really natural to you, and the different areas of practice have different, and as I said, benefits and problems that come along with it. So if you're dealing with HTA, you probably need 25 to 30 matters a month, to have a meaningful business. But that also leads to time management and having to deal with multiple things at the same time. And if it's really not you, if it doesn't come naturally to you, you've tried your best to educate yourself, learn from it, but still you're not good at it, you maybe want to focus on, a small claims. You may want to focus on landlord and tenant, educate yourself to focus on acts and benefits, right? So really on areas of practice that you focus on, like time, experience. So as they say, implement and fail fast so that you can learn from it and apply that into how you can better use your personal time. So understandability, pick your practice or one or two that resonate with you and focus your effort there so that at the end of the day you're enjoying what you're doing. Okay, and as stressful as it can be, sometimes if you're enjoying what you do, you're going to be sleeping well at night. And satisfaction also leads to growth, progress, and eventually provides you that financial success that we're all looking for. Definitely taking off, having spent the stressful time doing what you do, certainly plan for vacations, plan for, they even talk to the extent of using weekends as a way of detox yourself from what you do on a weekday basis. Okay, so certainly spend the time, family, take vacations, take your mind off if you can, as often as life allows you to. But please do it, because there was a survey I think in Colombia that said that legal professionals don't take as much as vacation as other professions do, and that's where this came out from. And last but not the least, ensuring a proper work-life balance is achieved, and that you're certainly managing stress, because you know what, the last thing you want to do is have that stress percolate into your legal business and what you do as a business, and hamper that name that you've created for yourself and for your firm, right? So personal time, very important, as cliche as it sounds, for all of us today with the stress that we deal with and where we are in this day and age. Legal professionals obviously have it more. So consciously doing all the things that you have to do to take it away, whether it's yoga or if you're doing this mind space exercises or hitting the gym, jogging, whatever it takes to get your mind off and be more relaxed so that you're fully energized to come back that Monday morning is what this slide all talks about. Okay? So with that, my friends, I will say thank you for joining me. It's just almost 3:10 on a Friday afternoon. Today's content obviously was everything practice management, specifically focusing on the professional obligations that you as legal professionals have, and we divided that to make it easier for you to consume this information. We looked at right from client intake to file management, financial management, business professional management, time and personal management. Today's CPD has been accredited across Ontario, New Brunswick, and British Columbia. This session will be recorded and available to you on our YouTube channel as early as Monday morning next week. And you're also able to view that recorded video as well to learn more about this area of topic and all the CPD credits. Okay? And last but not the least, we're very proud as a Canadian company to be nominated for the second year in a row as part of the Canadian Law Readers' Choice Awards. If you are a client, we request you considering voting for us as a product. We've been nominated under these categories. I do feel a bit sheepish to mention this during a CPD time, but I thought I'd get it out there anyways. And we do offer this opportunity for you to vote for us and a chance for an Amazon gift card. And you should have that in your email as a link. So if you have the time, please to take it to vote for us as part of this. We're a bootstrap, up-and-coming Canadian company that's focused in providing a very compliant and stress-free legal accounting and practice management software experience. And that's what we thrive for. And once again, thank you for joining us in today's CPD session. And we'll look forward to seeing you at our next session next week. Thank you.